This week's episode is brought to you by Campaign Refinery, an amazing new email marketing automation tool. Look, in the world of digital marketing, there's a lot to keep track of. We all know this. As much as we're in love with social media and the power of social conversation here at Social Inc. and on the All About Digital Marketing podcast, we are well aware at just how powerful email marketing can be. Email marketing is not dead. In fact, it's never been more important to help you leverage your presence everywhere else into the one channel that you'll own, regardless of what changes Facebook, Twitter, or any other platform makes in the future. I've known the founder, Travis Ketchum, for years, and he's been a past guest on the podcast, episode 15 if you want to listen to it. I've personally used his other products before, and they've been fantastic. The amount of thought that he's put into each and every one of what he's created has been incredible. I'd highly encourage you to try their free 14-day trial at campaignrefinery.com to see what world-class email marketing automation can do for you and your business. Massive thank you to Travis and Campaign Refinery for their support of the All About Digital Marketing show. Welcome to the All About Digital Marketing podcast. The show all about
digital marketing.
Digital marketing.
Digital marketing.
Digital marketing.
Brought to you by Social Inc., a digital marketing agency specializing in social media and content marketing for brave brands and forward-thinking SMEs. I'm your host, Chris Bruno, and as always, we're here to bring you the most actionable tips, tricks, tools, and insights to help you achieve more when it comes to your digital marketing. Subscribe to the show and be sure to share with a friend if you found something useful or interesting. You can find all the show notes and more information on www.allaboutdigitalmarketing.co.uk. Shaina, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So I'm really looking forward to this because today we're going to be talking a lot about repurposing content. But before we get started, you are currently the founder and CEO of Repurpose House. But can you give everybody a little bit of information about you, what you guys currently do, and how you got here?
Yeah. So I've been a big fan of content for the long haul. My background is actually in video production. So I started there and ended up realizing that there was a real need for strategic video production in digital marketing. So I actually had a video marketing company for a long time. And out of that, I realized that there was just this massive need and not really anybody providing a very strategic way to repurpose existing content that they're already creating. Because I ran into that issue with my clients. I was creating all of this content for them, and then it was kind of being used and then dying. And that to me just seemed like such a waste of time and resources. So I started Repurpose House. It's going to be 2 years here in November. And all we do is take any type of content, video, audio, and text, and we repurpose it into amazing looking video and images for all the different social media platforms. They're always sized properly for each platform, captions, progress bars, branded, all the things that, you just don't want to spend your time doing, but you could get so much more juice out of your existing content if you just did it.
You're completely right on this idea of one and done, and then it just dies. And it's such a shame, right? People take all this time and effort to create blogs, or worse still, they're paying people to write this content and they don't realize all the potential that it actually still has. And even, once it's been published and once it's been around for a while, there is nothing stopping you still using that. And it's a real shame for a lot of businesses, especially small businesses where resources are limited, right?
Right.
So how do you help people, especially when it comes to small businesses, to help them understand what are the possibilities of repurposing? So let's just take a really simple example. If somebody's got a few blogs that they've written and it's been a while, but they know that they still have some stuff there, what are some of the great things that they can do with their content to really start using that and repurposing it?
Yeah, well, it's funny because for a lot of people, they don't really see their blog as a social media asset, And I think that that's one of the ways that you as a business person can really get ahead of the game. If you have text content, you can have that all turned into social media savvy formatting. And by that, I mean like video performs crazy well on all of the social media platforms. I mean, there are even platforms that only do video, and traditionally blogs have only been text. So, you you copy and paste the link to your blog into your Facebook feed and nothing happens because Facebook doesn't want to send anybody to another site, right? And that's traditionally kind of been the extent of what you do with that content. But what savvy marketers are doing is they're taking snippets of that content, they're creating images. They're also doing, like what we do is the text motion videos. So you kind of want to keep your videos short on the social media platforms. So what we'll do is take up to 100 words that were impactful in that blog post, whether it's like stat heavy or just something impactful that somebody said or mentioned, anything that will draw attention to get them to want to read the entire blog. You can take that and turn it into a really cool text motion graphic video, kind of like those Goalcast style videos that you see online where the text animates in and out. You've got some stock music, stock imagery, and people look at that and they're like, oh man, well, that must be just an excessive amount of work or money to pay somebody to do it. But really, there's tons of tools out there that have really made that a lot easier. And then you have companies like us who we do it for you. So you don't have to sit in front of your computer and animate text. You just know that it's going to get spit back out to you. And then you just want to post it all over all of the different platforms. And that's just the way to utilize it for social. Because think about it, you have one short clip, and with one short 2-minute clip, if it's formatted properly, the options for social are pretty vast. Like you can do Facebook feeds, Facebook stories, Instagram feeds, IGTV, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, if that's where your audience is, right? I mean, there's just, the opportunities are pretty vast for just that one piece of content to now go all over the place because it's formatted properly. And that's just for social. Like there are tons of other ways you could format or you can repurpose the blog that's more in the long form. But like we specialize in social media, and that's where I really like to see people get the most bang for their buck.
So what I love there is your little caveat. You could put that on TikTok if your audience is there. And I think that's so important, right?
The elephant in the room, always.
So many people out there banging the TikTok drum going, you've got to get on TikTok. And you're like that. Yeah, of course. I can completely see why a forensic accountant should be on TikTok creating dance videos. But yeah, so I think that's huge. And again, I think lots of people, and especially the sort of audience that we work with and that are listening to the show now, small business owners, resource shy, right? We don't have necessarily the budgets, we don't necessarily have the amount of time, or we don't have the resources in terms of the people, the software, or the knowledge or the expertise to be able to do these things. And I think that's something that ends up meaning that people don't realize that there's another way, or that potentially don't realize that, you don't need to learn video animating to create something like you've just mentioned. So a simple video that takes a few of the stats, for example, and creates that into a short video, that is actually something that's fairly easy. And there's a lot of platforms out there, whether it be Wave.video or Lumen 5 or whatever you want to try and use. Right. But those sort of things are really, really powerful because it does help companies up their game in terms of their social content as well, right? Instead of just always sharing those links that push out to other people or to other websites like your blog, this gives you a way to make it more engaging, to make it more interactive. And I think that's such a huge benefit to so many small businesses.
Absolutely. And then think about it this way. Like if you have, like, let's say it's an 800-word blog, right? I can guarantee you that you've got more than one snippet of text that can stand alone that you can then say, hey, to read the full article, go here. So if you've got 4 of those in one blog article, that's a ton of content that is also then driving people to a larger piece of content where hopefully you're savvy and you've got some lead gen opt-ins going on there or something that you can gather data and information. But just the amounts that you can pull out of one blog post is pretty vast in comparison to just, like you said, posting the link and that's it.
I think again, so we did an experiment here on this show a little while back, and I actually took 2 of the blogs that we had written, one for the agency, one for my own personal blog, and turned those into episodes for the podcast. Yeah. So once a week we have an episode with an awesome guest like yourself, and once a week we just post up a shorter episode which is just about helping with one particular thing. And people don't realize even that, right? There's a potential to take your blog posts that you have already written, things that have been researched that have got those stats as well, and to be able to use those in different ways. So not just taking those stats and putting them into a video, but you actually discussing those main points from that blog. I mean, you've already created the content, you've done the hard work, which is researching the stats and getting your ideas down on paper. That itself can be turned into more pieces of content as well, can't it?
Absolutely. I love that, because if you are, hopefully when you're writing your blog post, you're writing something that's going to be, it may not always be evergreen, but at least it's got some life cycle. You know what I mean? Like unless you're in the business of news, like then I think that you're going to be okay with some of that content. And to be able to repurpose it in another long form piece of content is super smart. I mean, then you can tack on things like, okay, now make that a LinkedIn article, and now you can make those things courses. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can take content and repackage it and reach more of an audience on a broader scale. And I love that you're turning yours into podcast episodes. I think I'm going to steal that one.
You can have it. That's the freebie.
Okay. Perfect.
But it's something that is really interesting because we've started doing this as well for ourselves and for a client. And we love to experiment. I think everything should be an experiment. So, you try something. Sure. If it doesn't work, who cares? Move on. It was an experiment anyway. It wasn't meant to change the world. But actually, if it helps you and it works and it does better than other things have done for you, then great. You've learned what works and you can move forward with it. But one of the things we've been doing actually is once a month with my co-director is we literally just jump on a Zoom call. And what we're doing is we're actually recording the entire Zoom call, and we've chosen 3 or 4 topics that we're going to talk about. And literally we just have a really raw chat it lasts about 40 minutes as well. And we talk about these 4 different topics. And at the end of it, we've got this video, which has now turned into the Social Link show, as it's been called. We've done 2 so far and recording the 3rd tomorrow. But what we're actually doing with that is we're cutting it up. So we take a transcript of the video. We cut the video itself into 2 or 3, 4 shorts and different sections of what we've been talking about. From the transcripts, we can now create blog posts, which is really easy because you've already talked about the main themes and you've got both sides of our input from it. And then from that, we're actually taking the long format videos and cutting shorter parts out of that, taking some quotes out of the transcript and creating quote graphics from that. And this has become literally a repurposed model as a way of creating a month's worth of content.
Yeah, you guys sound like your repurposed powerhouses. Dang, good for you. That's a power play for repurposing. Well played.
Well, so this was the idea, right? What we were trying to do was just figure out, is there a way to build a system to do this? And instead of trying to think of, so basically instead of looking at everything we've got going, okay, right, if we start repurposing this, which we do, and we get clips from the podcast episodes go out as shorter videos or as sound waves, or whether it goes out as a quote graphic or anything else. But our thought process was, is there a way to actually make sure that the main piece of content that you create each month can actually be repurposed into the whole month's worth of content? And this was a principle that we thought, when we're talking to small businesses, it's always about the resources, right? We don't have enough people. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough money. Whatever it might be. So we were trying to figure out whether there was a way to build a system to actually help people with that. And it's been interesting so far. I mean, it hasn't gone viral or anything like that, but it is working, and it's quite an interesting one to kind of iterate on, because people don't realize the power of creating a video. Let's say you have a video chat with one of your clients or a supplier even, or a company that you work with closely because they're in a similar industry as you, but a supporting niche as opposed to a direct competitor. But you have a conversation, and things that come out of that, because it is an open chat, is usually more natural and more fluent, let's say, than it would be if you sat down to try and write a blog about a subject. You go less technical, you go more high level, you go more sort of, I don't know, it just becomes more sort of conversational, colloquial, and it's really nice. But actually, the insight that comes out of it almost flows 10x easier, or at least it does for us, than trying to write that blog article.
Oh yeah, because I mean, you're not forcing it at that point. That whenever you're having the conversations with other people in the industry, it just feels more like you're sharing the knowledge, and it's a more excitable exchange. So I completely agree with that. One thing I wanted to pop back into, how you were saying that you turn the videos into blog articles. That's actually how we do it. We reverse engineer that. So we don't start with text, we start with video. But there's a really cool tool that for all the resourceful entrepreneurs who want to spend less energy, we use a company called Content Cucumber. And what we do is send them our videos, and they will write the blog posts for us out of it. So if you were to say, hey, we need 4 different blog posts out of this one long form video, they will chop it up. They will do the research. They will take everything that you're saying and put it in your brand voice, things like that. We always go through it afterwards and then clean it up, make sure that it's really to our voice and things that we needed to double check on. But if you don't want to spend time writing the full length blog out of the transcript, I mean, that's a great option for you to utilize that service for your own benefit.
We will definitely check it out, and we'll also drop a link into the show notes for anybody else who's listening.
For sure. They're awesome.
So what are some of the simple things or one of some of the simple tools actually that you would recommend? So we've just talked about Content Cucumber, and I know we've mentioned sort of Wave.video or Lumen 5. Are there any other really cool tools that you find as a great way to help with that repurposing, especially for small businesses, that aren't ready for agencies yet?
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? And here's the thing, like it really just comes down to how much time are you willing to trade for money? You know what I mean? Like there are options across the board. There are a lot of DIY options, but you're going to be investing a lot of time into managing that process, right? Then you just need to decide what your time is worth and if it makes sense for you to then hire either a full-fledged agency or like a productized service like us to do those pieces for you. But as far as like the DIY resources, there's literally something for anything that you need to do, which is what's really, really cool about doing this right now in this day and age. So one really cool tool that we're big fans of, actually, we know all the guys over there, it's called Headliner. It works for video. It works for audio. They do like the moving waveforms. Originally, they just used to do like podcast episodes. And so you would, upload your audio, pick your little in and out points, and then it would create a moving waveform. And then you would have captions and things like that. But it's become really robust now where you can upload a video, you can link a video, you can let it know the little short clip that you want pulled out of the video. It will trim it. You can add your text, your headlines. It will automatically populate captions based on Google's AI. So you're going to have to go in there and make some modifications and, fix some spelling errors and things like that. So that there's a little bit of time that's spent there. But ultimately, like you can Gary V your content through Headliner if you have some time and bandwidth to actually sit there and make it happen for yourself. But it's a very cool tool.
So I'm going to have to put my hand up here and say we use Headliner in the agency, and we do use it for our podcast stuff, but we haven't actually used it to start clipping away at videos. So we will definitely have a look at that as well. But that's an awesome one. I like that. That's another great way of doing things. And I think there's too much of this habit of one and done. And I'm wondering how you help people to really understand that importance of, if you've written a blog article, I'll often say to clients, that doesn't mean that's one social media post. If you write a blog article once a week, by the end of the year, that means you've got 52 articles, which, like you said, unless they're super specific, you wrote about, I don't know, what happened last weekend and it was really specific to your industry. And, after that, no one remembers it. But everything that you're really writing is for your audience, and they should be around the subjects that matter and the things that you're helping clients to sort of figure out, or problems you're solving, etc. So a lot of this content, if you're writing one a week, at the end of the year, you've got 52 articles that are just there and that basically get forgotten, right? They're like books that end up on the bookshelf collecting dust. So what are some of the other ways to try and encourage people to say, right, go back in and try and reuse, repurpose and upcycle some of that content to really get that benefit?
I mean, really, it's as simple as what you just said, like reuse it. One of the funniest examples that I have, because I hear it so often, are podcasters. And they will say, like, I'll be like, why don't you repurpose your old episodes? They're very concerned about making sure they have like the assets for the new episode that's going live, right? Which is super important, especially if you interview guests, because they want to be able to share that content with their audience, which is great for cross promotion, expanding your audience, things like that. But like in between those time periods, like why aren't you taking previous episodes? And the response that I get so often, which cracks me up, is everybody already heard that episode. And I'm like, hold on, everybody already heard the episode. So what you're telling me is you haven't grown your audience, and you reached literally everybody who was in your audience with that one episode, or even outside of your audience, right? And if you have like an awesome guest or an awesome episode, just like your blog, if you have this great content sitting there, why wouldn't you, like, let's say it was an episode with some like massive person in your industry and you recorded it 6 months ago, went live 6 months ago. But like it got a ton of traction when it went live. Like, why wouldn't you constantly be repurposing that, putting that all over social? Because if that's what attracted your audience, making new assets out of that consistently and gaining the attention of people who may not have already been listening to your podcast, following your blog, things like that, you're gaining new listeners, new readers, new audience with older content because you knew it worked the first time. So keeping the mindset of like, this content is working, this content is impactful, and it's bringing new eyes and, ears to my content. don't just let it die, continuously recycle that content and put it online and get all of those new ears, eyes, but also have a call to action on all of it. I think that's one thing that is super important. Like, don't just post the content to have content on your social feed. Make sure you have an end game. Like, what is the final thing that you want to happen when that person watches that video or, sees the audiogram or looks at the image? And if that is go to your website, check out the blog post and opt into your lead magnet, then you need to make sure that you tell them what to do next on these videos when they're on social, because just the clip for the clip's sake is fine. And a lot of people do that. But if you really get strategic in what the end game needs to be and what the final thing you want them to do is, and how the journey they need to take to get there, right? Then making sure that you have call to actions and are very specific about what action you want them to take next. And also how you repurpose the content is going to make a huge difference in whether or not they take that action. And there's a lot of really cool strategic things that you can do to push them further to actually, go to the blog, listen to the podcast, watch the video.
Couldn't agree more. And again, it's one of those things I was going to ask you when you said, everyone's already heard that episode. For a second there, I thought you had been talking to Seth Rogen. But, for the majority of us, every kind of listener that you gain through whichever channel it might be is a win, right? That's what you're looking for. You're looking for that cross promotion with guests, and you're looking for partnerships with companies that will also share or anything else. And every single way that you can bring somebody back in is going to be a useful way of doing it. And something that we did recently actually was we went through, so I think we've now published 71 episodes or so far. We went back and we just basically pulled up the stats and went, right, what are the 5 most listened to episodes? And exactly like you just mentioned, right, those 5, sent the links to the one of our editors and just went, find me 5 good clips for each of them, and what we're going to do is we're going to repush these out, and and we'll do something along the lines of, this was our most popular episode ever, check it out for yourself if you've missed it or if you haven't heard it yet. And again, you're using that ability to say, this is really popular content on our channel that you might not have seen yet. So if you want to start somewhere and get involved with our channel and with our brand and with our podcast, this is the most appealing piece of content for you to start with. So why not use that again, right? It's a real shame when people kind of just leave it there and kind of go, yeah, that's it, it's done, I can move on.
Right. And one thing that people forget to do, they get so concerned with social media, the Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and all that stuff, is take those small snippets and load them to YouTube. People are actively searching for content on Google and YouTube. And if you don't know yet, Google owns YouTube, guys. So anytime you go and search something on either of those platforms, you're going to get suggested videos for that content. So when you're on Facebook and somebody's scrolling and you have a piece of content that scrolls onto their feed, you've kind of intruded on their space, right? Like, they didn't ask for that piece of content. They're scrolling to scroll, and whatever appeals to them, they'll watch or engage with, right? But it's exactly the opposite on YouTube. People are actively searching for something very specific. They want answers. And if you have a very short 2-minute clip out of your longer podcast episode that talks about something hyper specific, the chances of that clip populating as opposed to the entire episode, because it's so densely populated with the keywords, is going to be a lot higher. So make sure that the content also lives in a place where when people go to search for it, you appear. People forget about YouTube with these shorter repurpose snippets. And I feel like it's one of the more impactful ways to be putting content online.
I think that's a great other piece of advice. And again, it's maximizing the channels that you are using, right? So I think a lot of people, what they potentially struggle with is trying to say, right, okay, I'm going to be on YouTube, Google, Facebook, Instagram. I'm going to start chucking up stuff on TikTok, etc. And eventually you get to the point where, it's exhausting unless that's your full-time job. Even for us, and I'm guessing even for yourself, right? We do this for a living. We do it for clients. We try and do it our best for ourselves as an agency. We also, even as directors of the company, we both of us own our own personal websites. We also run our own personal social channels, and we always constantly try and keep that presence up with good content and continuously posting. But it's exhausting, right? So you end up at a point where you have to say, right, okay, no, like I'm going to start. When we started our podcast, it was very simple. We chose the 3 channels that we were comfortable with, and that we knew that we could create content for fairly easily, quickly, and be able to cross promote and just be able to move forward with. But I think a lot of people get confused with the fact that it's very important to be a little bit everywhere or do things in the right way. Like you mentioned, having those short snippets, keyword focused onto YouTube makes a great idea for a channel because it will build up and hopefully you get the SEO benefits. But also at the same time, if you don't have the time to be able to be everywhere, then find a way to limit what you're trying to do. Something that's comfortable, that you can keep pushing out good content in the channels that you're most engaged in, or that that your audience is in, or the one that your industry uses the most for whatever reason. And I think that's something that's really important as well. How do you find that you kind of direct people, especially small businesses? Again, we're always looking at that kind of resource limited business. How do you help them to understand and choose what they need to do?
Yeah, and to your point, like it can be overwhelming to think that you need to be on all platforms in like full force. And to be honest, especially if you're just starting diving into especially a repurpose content strategy, it's unrealistic to think that you're going to execute all of that in a way that's effective and doesn't like drive you absolutely out of your mind. So, my first piece of advice there is really just sit down and think about where your audience is. Maybe pick 2 platforms that, like you said, you're comfortable with, but you're going to make the biggest impact on. Like for us, we know like LinkedIn is a great platform for us and Facebook is. If we were to only choose 2, those would be where we are. I mean, we'll always post to YouTube just because it just should live there anyway. But like as far as social media goes, those are going to be the two that we would have chosen first. But for us, like to post on TikTok and to break our back doing that, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to invest time and energy there when if we were to spread it too thin, or as a small business, like if you were to spread yourself too thin, like you're not being effective on any of the platforms. Just be really, really effective on a couple that you're really, really good at. And then as that becomes more streamlined and it's not as like tedious to do it, then you can start introducing and testing new platforms that you're like, hey, maybe Instagram would be a great one just for brand awareness, or maybe we do dive into TikTok because we do have a younger demographic. But make sure that you've got the core couple of platforms like locked and loaded and just going really well and humming, and then you can start expanding and playing with it. It just feels like a much more like stable and realistic strategy that's not going to cause burnout.
So I'm a little disappointed because this means then that I can't find you doing choreographed dances on TikTok, right?
Not lately, but some of them may have landed on Instagram a few times. Before the TikTok days. Trust me, there's a lot of that goofiness out there with me. So,
but the thing is, it is interesting as well, because I think when you see people like the Gary V's and everything else, and they're jumping into TikTok and they build their audience super quickly, and they're talking about how this is a great opportunity, etc. I think there's a couple of things that people don't realize. It doesn't mean that TikTok is right for everyone, again, because you're looking for your audience, who's your target demographic, who you're going after. And realistically, the chances of you finding, like I said, the need to be on TikTok for a forensic accountancy firm is very slim to zero. But I think, again, what you've mentioned there is exactly what the Gary V model is. Gary V didn't have all channels or everywhere and then sort of try and figure all this out. He basically built an audience and has a core audience. And because he's become a bestseller, and because he's written loads of books and he creates all this content, when he decided to jump onto TikTok, a ton of his audience followed him over to TikTok. So he can grow that audience remarkably quickly because he has that baseline of the core demographics where he already is. So the Facebook, the Instagram, and everything else that he's been doing for, 10 years nearly. So I think that's something that's really important. And again, once you've built that base and that audience, then you can take those people with you, and then you can start doing things in different places. And I think they will follow. But I think that's something that a lot of people, especially at the moment, so much hype around TikTok, so much sort of, you need to be on TikTok. And we're kind of like that. Why do you need to be on TikTok? 90% of small businesses probably don't need to be on TikTok.
Right. Absolutely. And, while we're on the topic of Gary V, I just want to help people understand kind of what his circumstance is. Here's the deal. The guy is a repurposing powerhouse. He gives it all away. He lets you know exactly what to do. And if I ever got a chance to meet him, I'd give him the biggest hug to thank him for creating a model that I created my business around. Literally every time the guy changes something and how you should repurpose, our entire business has to change because we had to modify it for whatever Gary says. But ultimately, like, I think what people just see his content everywhere. And people have to remember he has a team of over 30 people who are all just dedicated to his content strategy. So to think that you're going to do anything at that scale, you would have to have the resources that he has to make it happen. He has people following him around filming every single day. Like he has an entire team that is posting on all of these accounts, repurposing stuff constantly. And also like, he's not just he tends to know the platforms that are going to be popular because he tries all of the platforms, even the failing ones. Like, do we not remember Gary talking about how awesome Vine was? And many people don't even remember what that was. So he tests them all. He engages in them. And then, if it works, great. And if it doesn't, great, because he was right either way. Something's going to catch, and he creates content to kind of do as a catch-all for everything. And it's a smart strategy. So I think that like when people see that, they're like, oh my gosh, I have to be up to this status and I have to be able to generate this massive audience, and why isn't it working for me? It's because his resources and his dedication to his strategy are so vastly different than what like the vast majority of content creators are outside of that. So don't look at his strategy and be daunted by it. Look at it and be like, that's awesome. I can start on a micro scale of that and still deem it a success.
Yes, a big shout out to D-Rock, who basically runs around filming Gary all the time.
Yeah.
And I do think that that's a big thing that you've mentioned there, right? You're not going to be Gary, at least not for a while. So what I suggest for people to do is to actually go back and find Gary V's wine library videos and try and find the earliest possible ones, because that's where you're at now, right? That's the starting point. Right. And I think that's what's really important. It's, we've got great benefits today. You can pull out your smartphone, go live in HD, straight onto a social channel, and and it's free, costs you nothing. I worked heavily in video back in 2011. The costs were insane. We had to host videos, and we had to put stuff in different places. And if you wanted to have it linked just on one particular web page, you couldn't just throw it on YouTube. So everything's changed in that sense. And there's so much that you can do. But again, go all the way back. And I think if you've got any YouTubers that you really like, find their very first ever videos and look at those. If they still have it. If they've kept them up. Yeah, most of them are pretty good, I think. Or at least the guys that I follow and stuff are pretty good in that sense. And I think if you go all the way back, it gives you a real sense of who they were. And also that you realize that, to get to where they are today, there's like a 10, 12-year journey. So if you're okay with you're going to get involved in that journey and you're going to start today, and that you're not going to hit those kind of levels, and you also potentially might not, but if you're okay with a 10 to 12-year journey of content creation and constantly learning and bettering yourself and slowly but surely building that audience, then, you'll get there. And eventually you will have somebody like a D-Rock running around after you filming, and 3-4 guys behind you just constantly posting out stuff for you. But until you get to that point, it's not going to look like that. Let's be honest.
Right. And also keep in mind, that should really only matter if that's your goal. Like if your end game is, I want to be like a Gary V and just have content everywhere, then great. But if your best case scenario is I pull 15 clients a month from my content, then the strategy should support that, not growing like crazy and being one of these awesome YouTubers who are crushing it. It's just, you have to look and see what your goals are and what your deliverables need to be. If you can measure it and it's going to make sense for your business model in 2 years, if you start now, if in 6 months, if you start now, I mean, really what matters is what you want the final result to be. And that may or may not be Gary V status of content. You know what I mean? It may just be, I want to grow my business by X amount in the next, 2 years. And you can create your strategy accordingly.
So I think this is something that's really important as well. Actually, what's your opinion on podcasting, right? Because I get a very mixed bag when I talk to people. When anyone says to me they're thinking about starting a podcast, my honest answer to them is, yeah, go for it. If you're doing something for a very specific group of people that they'll want to listen to, then do it. Do it for yourself. Do it because you love the process. Do it because you'll meet a ton of really interesting people. I've been doing this for over a year now, and I absolutely love it. But what's your impression of that, and how do you feel people should approach that?
It's funny because Repurpose House started out of, I was doing just video podcasts for clients in my video marketing company. And I saw it as such a valuable way to create long form content that if you're bringing on guests, just the value of the cross promotion alone is incredible. Because guys, keep in mind that like when you post something on your feed, especially if it's like a business profile, really next to nobody is seeing it. But if people engage with it, if guests are sharing it, hopefully their audience is similar to the audience that you want to be attracting. If they're guests on your show, I would assume so. Like just them sharing your content, you're getting in front of fresh eyes every single episode if you're interviewing people. Not only that, but like the connections that I've gotten to make and the relationships that have grown out of being interviewed and interviewing people on my own shows has been so invaluable. Like I 100% think that podcasting as a strategy for content is just an absolute no-brainer. You get to have conversations. Also, let's keep in mind that like when you have a blog and if you are the one writing the content, the onus is on you to come up with the data and the information, really. But when you are podcasting and interviewing other people, you're the conduit to somebody else's knowledge. So really, people will come to you for the insight and the knowledge, but you don't have the responsibility of really delivering it at all times. You get to interview other experts in the field who are happy to be interviewed and talk about their expertise because that's what they're excited about. So you get to over deliver on content that you really wouldn't have any other means to give your audience. You get the power of cross promotion. You have long form content. Like podcast listeners are very, very sticky. Like for how short the attention span is of people who watch videos online, the fact that like the stats are that people will listen, podcast listeners will listen to 50% or more of an episode. And the majority of them do. And when episodes are like 30, 40 minutes, that is so much time that people are allowing you to literally be in their ear. So just by itself as a long form, I think it's a super smart strategy. But then everything you can do with the content after the long form piece is completed, like the options are so endless on how many times you could repurpose it to how many platforms in how many ways. Like you said, they can become blog posts. You can make them LinkedIn articles. You can chop them up into individual videos. You can post them all over the social platforms individually. Each podcast episode should get you at minimum 4 to 5 clips that were impactful that somebody said on there. And then each of those end up being a cross promoted item. It's just like, if you're going to start somewhere, it's a great place to start. I have 2 strategies for core content, like the base level long form content, and podcasting is definitely one of the 2.
There you go, guys. You heard it here first. Well, you heard it here again.
Well, again, yeah.
And I'll repurpose this into a clip so that you just hear this on repeat. But yeah, start a podcast. It's a great way to create content, and it's a great way to meet awesome people and expand your network, cross promote. I mean, to me, there really isn't a huge amount of losses or potential downside really to doing this, because even if you just used it for the bulk of your own long form content creation afterwards, it's a great tool. It's just a fantastic way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I would suggest though is if you are going to go that route, like front load as much as you can. Like don't expect to record an episode every week. Like just do the John Lee Dumas thing and like bang them all out in a matter of 2 days at the beginning of the month, and just then put them on autopilot in whatever process or system you put together to post produce and get it loaded. But chasing content is just something that I try to advise people against, because to think that you're realistically going to be on top of it all the time is kind of a recipe for failure, because life happens, people get sick or the internet goes down or whatever, and you don't want to be on the gun making sure that you're creating the content like the day before it needs to go live. Just front load it and have it banked and vaulted and know that it's sitting there ready to get promoted and put online whenever it needs to be.
So I'd say that's great advice, not just for a podcast, but for any content marketing that you're doing, really. Because so my business partner will always say 2 weeks ahead is good for the head. I mock him every time he says it, but it's so true. And it's something that we implemented, well over a year and a half ago now. And literally for ourselves, for clients, for anything, we should never be working on content for this week. No one should. because
Right.
you're just constantly in kind of panic mode. Crap, has this been approved yet? Has that been read? Has that been proofed? Who's written this? Has that been scheduled? So all of that kind of stuff. And I think that goes for everything. There's unless you're in news or unless you're writing an opinion piece based on something that's just happened, you shouldn't really be trying to create content that's going to be published on the same day or in the same week. You should be creating content a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks ahead of the game and building that up so that, exactly like you said, you take all the stress out. You're not chasing your tail, because life does happen. There's always something. And this way, you're just constantly ahead of the game. You know what's happening. You know where you're going. You've got stuff scheduled in advance, and that just takes all the pressure off.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely subscribe to that. Like when I was doing just video production, that's what I would tell my clients. I'm like, listen, we're going to create 4 videos. Each of them are going to be like 6 tips of XYZ. We're going to bulk film them, bring an extra shirt or whatever. And now you can do it with your phone, right? Which is awesome. It's funny how you were saying like it was so expensive then. Like my equipment, like just what's on my phone right now that's available to film with cost me thousands and thousands of dollars 10 years ago whenever I was actually using video production equipment. But like you can front load, you can create your content. I keep a running list on my phone, and I suggest this for other people. If they're going to create like one-off videos or like longer form content, think of the things that you get asked constantly as a leader in your space. Like what questions are you answering all of the time? What do you hear yourself saying on repeat? If you speak a lot, what are the 5 things you say all the time, every time you speak? And continuously have a list going on your phone of topics that you think that you can talk about on video, and just have like a day a week or a day every 2 weeks where you bang through that list and record all those videos. Change your shirt, throw a hat on one of them. I don't know what you need to do to make them look a little bit unique, but then you've filmed it all in a matter of a couple of hours. You're not chasing it. And then you can send it off to go do all of the different fancy things that you need to do to it, whether you do that or somebody else does, however that works in your business. But, making sure that you have a dedicated, like, this is when I film my content or record my content kind of day is going to be really, really helpful to make sure that you're not, like, again, chasing it or, don't know what kind of content you're going to create because now you have a running list.
I remember the good old days of having proper big DSLRs to be able to record good footage. And nowadays I pull out my iPhone 11 Pro, and it's probably as good as at the time. And it's really kind of heartbreaking to know how many thousands of pounds went down the drain. But what I will say as well, for anyone listening, you do have an incredible gift in the fact that the smartphone will allow you to do that. And what I would say, because I know that I've heard this before, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are as well, but the amount of people that will kind of say, no, I'm not very good with video. I can't just ramble on and talk to a video or anything else. We found a great app called Bigvu. I don't know how you actually pronounce it, but Bigvu. And it allows you to add a teleprompter script so that you can literally read your script off your phone whilst it's recording. And this is a great way of doing it. It helps you if you're not 100% sure, if you're not confident enough yet to just stand there in front of your phone and talk. But it's a great, great way to get you started. And exactly like Shaina said, you've got all these ideas. You know what questions your clients ask you the most. You know what the biggest stumbling blocks, the biggest problems that you're solving, all of these things. And even then, I keep notes on my phone about anything. If I'm listening to a podcast and something comes up that's interesting, I'll pop into notes and I'll drop something in there. And I'll go back through it once a week. And I basically find topics for blog posts, topic for videos, things that we're going to talk about, things that we can write about, all sorts of things that I just end up coming back to and finding. And for me, it's a really great way to just keep that kind of ideation and content creation process so that it keeps ticking over.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I actually live on the opposite side of the prompter argument, because I just did so much video production with people who weren't used to being in front of a camera that I would tell them, like, it's really, sometimes it can be very difficult to read a prompter and not sound like a machine, especially if you're not used to it. But the beauty of it is, like, since it's on your phone, it's not going live. Like, pull the trigger and watch yourself do it. And then you'll see the things that you need to adjust and change. And it's kind of goes back to the whole looking at the first videos that these YouTubers did. Like, they weren't awesome. I can guarantee you that. Like, they were terrible, just like how you're going to be at the very beginning if you haven't filmed content. Like, don't expect yourself to be the most amazing, perfect personality on video the first time you hit the record button. You have to give yourself some time. And the beauty is you have a little delete button there where if you don't love it, you can do it again and again and again. But one thing that like I suggest, if you just don't feel comfortable on a teleprompter, or you've tried it and you just don't feel like it looks good or natural, I like to tell people to break up your video into individual numbers. And this kind of goes into a couple of different strategies. So if you say like, it's going to be a video talking about how to feed your dog. It's going to be the top 7 things to never do when feeding your dog, right? Because there's psychology behind like how you phrase things. But if you have 7 tips, first of all, people's brains like numbers. Numbers just perform really, really well. They also like to close loops. So think about it. If you have 7 different tips that you're going to go over in this video, now you know you have 7 different assets to repurpose, right? All over social media. And you can say tip 1 of 7 on what not to do when feeding your dog. And for the rest of the tips, go to the full length video here. And now you can send them to go and close the loop on those numbers on your website or on the blog post. But now this video, you can just do one small snippet at a time. So you know, okay, tip 1 is this. All you have to do is talk about tip 1 really quick. You don't have to do a 10-minute video off the cuff and hope that it's going to be great. Do tip 1, then stop recording. You're like, okay, that felt good. Then do tip 2. And then you have an opportunity to like know where your little cuts are going to be when you go to repurpose it. But also it gives you an opportunity to take a break in filming so you don't feel like you're just rambling on. Like you can be very specific about what your smaller topics are going to be, get to the point, and by the time it's all compiled together, it's a nice piece of content. It repurposes perfectly. That then can turn into an awesome blog post with your 7 tips, attach the video. There's just that now you have a really stellar piece of core content that you know how you're going to expand it when you go to put it all over the place.
I like that. And I'd probably just add one thing and say, like, if you're going to do that kind of 5 listicle idea and do 5 different videos, shoot each of them in different locations. And literally, because that way, then you can mess it up as many times as you want until you're happy with whichever one you've got. And you can literally have the transitions just coming together. So it doesn't look like it's clipped because you made a mistake. It'll just literally look like you filmed the 5 video points in different locations on purpose. And then you can just have a transition that says tip 2, tip 3, tip 4.
Right.
What a great way of doing it. And you just don't care if you mess up any of them in particular along the way. You can just get a chance to redo it.
Yeah.
I'd say one last tip as well that we've used quite a bit recently is for clients that weren't feeling at ease. And because technology is getting better and we can now record decent quality if somebody's got a half decent webcam or a phone, etc. But what we've actually been doing is using things like Zoom so that we can have the conversation with them. And what that does is it takes all the pressure off them in terms of them having to just record answers to these particular questions. And they just sort of talk to us. And basically the edits then come out with nothing to do with us. We're not in the videos at all. But their questions are answered really well and really specifically. And they come across supernatural, which I thought was a great way of doing it. And we've ended up helping a few people with like that. And it seems to work really, really well in that sense as well. So if you're trying to do this at home, get somebody else on a Zoom call, one of your friends, just have a chat, feel at ease, and then just try and answer them as naturally as possible. Give them a list of 5 questions to ask you, and then just try and answer them as naturally as possible, talking one-to-one rather than worrying and panicking about the camera and thinking that you're talking one-to-many.
Yeah. And then your friend who you have on the call gets to put producer in their line of credits.
Executive producer.
Yeah, there you go.
Shaina, this has been an absolutely awesome conversation. Before we wrap up, what's your favorite channel at the moment online in terms of social, digital, whichever?
LinkedIn across the board. I mean, we are B2B, so it really makes sense for our business. And just the reach is so vast right now. It's like Facebook 5 years ago, and you'll hear that over and over again, especially if you follow Gary Vee. Like you're able to get an audience, you're able to get visibility. They reward you for engaging, which is awesome. Videos crushing it there, which is awesome. You're able to go live now. I mean, it's just the opportunity for engagement with the right audience, and the fact that you can actually get exposure there is really amazing. So I would absolutely suggest, if you are a B2B company, to start really diving into that and utilizing it as much as you can before it becomes a pay-to-play platform like, Facebook and the others.
Like they all invariably do.
Yeah, exactly.
Where's the best place for people to connect with you?
Yeah. Well, LinkedIn's one of them. Facebook, and, pretty much all the platforms. It's going to be Shaina Weisinger. I will say that I kind of pick and choose my content for each platform. It's not all business. So you'll see a lot of dogs on Instagram. I will tell you that up front. But as far as me, it's going to be all those Shaina Weisinger. And then if you want to check out like the more educational side of everything that's going out, which is going to be through Repurpose House, Repurpose House Co. on all the channels. But really, the website has a ton of really great resources. The blog is all like super stat heavy with like how to do a bunch of these things that seem super foreign to you. We've got courses and things like that. And then obviously the done for you service. So there's just a lot that we give that could be super helpful in your strategy.
Shaina, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. This is great.
The All About Digital Marketing podcast is brought to you by Social Inc., a distributed digital marketing agency specialized in delivering results through online campaigns. Whether it's content marketing, social media marketing, online advertising, or web design, we've got you covered, from strategy through to delivery. If you're struggling with your digital marketing, get in touch today by simply visiting www.socialinc.co.